Welcome to The Week Ahead, a podcast by SBM Intelligence. I'm your host, Veronica Pana Igube. Every Friday, we explore stories that are shaping the African continent. France and Algeria have restored ties after months of tension over France's support for Morocco's Western Sahara plan. They agreed to restart full cooperation. Meanwhile, Algeria banned Mali flights after shooting down a drone, leading Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger to recall their ambassadors. Could Algeria's renewed friendship with France worsen its relationship with its Sahel neighbors? At least 52 people were killed and nearly 2,000 displaced in recent attacks on 6 villages in Plateau State, Nigeria, one of the deadliest incidents since December 2023. In Kebbi State, 16 vigilantes were killed by terrorists while trying to stop cattle rustling. In Borno State, Governor Zulum raised concern over a surge in Boko Haram attacks, warning the state is losing ground. He urged more support for the military, while the Shehu of Borno said that several local government areas are still under Boko Haram control. Can Nigeria effectively contain the growing insecurity across multiple regions? Finally, the Edo Governorship Election Petition Tribunal has dismissed the PDP and candidate Ashwe Ighodalo charged his challenge against the victory in September 2023 elections. The tribunal ruled that the PDP failed to prove claims of overvoting and legal violations. Does this repeated dismissal of petitions signal stronger confidence in the electoral process or highlights challenges in proving election irregularities? Confidence Makhari, security analyst at SBM Intelligence, joins us for insights on these critical stories. Welcome, Confidence. Confidence? So let's begin.
Hello.
Hi. Let's begin with the first.
Hello, Ver.
Yeah, hi. Let's begin with the first story of France renewing relationship with Algeria. What do you think are the key motives behind France and Algeria restoring full diplomatic ties at this time?
All right. Restoring full diplomatic relations at this time comes off the backdrop of a couple of ruckus that has been happening since in the 1950s. Both countries have been in the 1950s, started in the 1940s, and mm, so I was saying earlier that the both countries do not really have the best of relations, given French actions during Algeria's war of independence in the 1940s. So Algeria became, they didn't treat Algeria like a colony. They treated it as part of an extension of France. So they had a lot of French people who settled there. And so it became a very thorny issue when time for independence came. So when the National Liberation Front launched its insurgency, the government in Paris responded with an overwhelming force. And some of the tactics it deployed went beyond conventional warfare. So, for instance, the French military deployed around 400,000 troops using scorched policies, just like burning villages, displacing civilians, and destroying livelihoods, so automatic torture. The French soldiers in 1957. We had paratroopers under any in enhanced interrogation centers. We had estimates of about 20,000 to 30 the war. So they also use Nigerians up to about a quarter of the population into barbed wire enclosures and with abysmal conditions. In a bid to isolate the insurgent group. So the successive French governments have sort of tried to gloss over the issue. Even the one French president, which is Emmanuel Macron, that even tried to acknowledge everything possible, but stopped short of apologizing. So that particular issue has been a thorny, and if you look at it, it's alive till date. So it has been the bone of contention why relationship between Algiers and Paris hasn't really been good. So, but right now, they're trying to look for a climb down and for geopolitical alignments and for Western Sahara. Western Sahara is a piece of territory in the western parts of the Sahel, which is contested by both Algeria and Morocco. So right now, what they are trying to do is they climb down from the animosity that has colored much of their relations in the past 50, 60 years, and trying to do things like collaboration across some fronts. Some of the fronts being things like the real check is this: there are thorny issues, that will need to be addressed. I would like to see how they are going to manage to do this thing, given that some underlying issues have not been addressed. So, from now, Algeria is trying to move a little bit away from its hardline position on Western Sahara, and it's trying to play the diplomatic game as much as it can, saying that Morocco is winning a lot of geopolitical talking points, and by being, and then they also wanted to get a bit of the pie. So it's been interesting to see how this goes forward from here.
But do you also think that their diplomatic fallout with Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso can lead to a long-term regional isolation for Algeria, being that they have now gone to end their relationship with France?
So I don't think it's the two issues are that connected. So Algeria, on one hand, is trying to do a rapprochement with France, and on the other hand, it's ramping up rivalry with the AES states, and for good measure. Um, Again, I would like to reiterate that both issues are not the same. A bit of context for what happened between the AES states and Algeria was that over the weekend last week, a Malian drone flew too close to the Algerian border and it was shot down by Algerian authorities. The place where it flew close to was called Tinzautin, still within Malian territory, but very close to the border and border with Algeria. And the Algerians were very too pleased about it, given that they felt that it was some sort of a spy drone. The Malians, on the other hand, said that they carried out the drone surveillance to spy on terror groups around the number one terror group in the area, with the Azawad breakaway faction, people who are trying to form a caliphate, the Tuareg caliphate, that formed the insurgency of 2012. And the Malian government with their Russian counterparts have been trying to fight against these guys since the Algiers Peace Accord broke down. That they signed in 2015 broke down in late 2023. So they haven't really been too happy about it, and they decide to cut off relations with each other. Each person recalled the ambassador, each person closed their airspace to flights from both countries. In terms of how this thing is going to affect relationship, is that cross-border security cooperation between both countries is going to be flat-footed, given how terribly the Malian government has handled the Tuareg insurgency in the past 1 year. Even with the help of the Russians, they haven't really been able to beat them back. The Algerians have watched with some sort of nervousness what's going on. I should also mention that on the border between Algeria and Niger, where Agadez is, We've seen a couple of heightened security activities there. I think it was less than 6 months ago that an Italian national and a Spanish tourist were kidnapped around there, just between in Nagades, between Algeria and Niger. So many of the security issues that have been going on in Niger and Mali have been watched with apprehension on Algeria. So these are kind of things that they are going to shoot down as quickly as they can to sort of protect themselves from getting involved in some of the issues. As to what exactly is going to be a fallout from this, the first thing is that the AES would lose a very important security partner in Algeria. As I mentioned earlier, it was the Algerians that brokered the 2015 Algiers Accord between Mali and the Tuareg rebels. So with the junta in Bamako ditching the pact in 2024, and now this rupture between Algiers and Bamako, we are going to see a pivot away from Algerian influence towards things like self-reliance, or with Russian backing. The Russia-Africa Corps, which used to be known as the Wagner Group, are already active in Mali. It could deepen Russian footprints. The Russians could increase their drone assistance, without the whole Western Star conditions, and it tilts the Sahel further away from France and ECOWAS, and all of that. As I mentioned earlier, border security is a huge thing. The Algerians, unlike the Nigerians that we have down the Sahel, are very, very particular about patrolling their border, given their very extensive history of terrorism. I was saying earlier that many of the guys, the issue of the Algerian War of Independence is still fresh in many people's memories. Some of the guys who fought in the Algerian War of Independence are some of the people who formed Al-Qaeda in the Maghreb, the Al-Murabitun, and Sadr, so many of them. So the Algerian government is very much aware of their capability, and they're very, very nervous whenever this thing tends to spill over the border. So that very important component of border security is going to be gone, and without cross-border operations like the defunct CMOC, CEMOC, which has collapsed, we're going to be seeing a lot of thriving of militants across the border areas. So, and finally, this whole thing just plays into the hands of Morocco, because the rivalry between Morocco and Algeria still exists. And so Algeria not talking to the AES state simply gives Morocco the heft to go into the Sahara and then partner with these guys and then cut off Algeria from the Western Sahara question. So I think the most immediate fallout, or the most obvious fallout right now in the short term, is going to be Moroccan win and Algeria taking the back foot in terms of its relationship with its neighbors.
I mean, moving down to Nigeria, we saw that the killings in Plateau State and the attacks, there has been recent attacks where we saw 52 people were killed and nearly 2,000 displaced. We're also seeing incidents in Kebbi and Borno State. Why has the insecurity in Nigeria persisted? Despite military operations, despite government promises of saying, oh, we're eradicating, the country is stable, there's more security than ever before. Why are we seeing the renewed attacks, especially in Plateau State that has been relatively quiet?
So Plateau has not really been relatively quiet. We've had series of disturbances across the state. Maybe not in Bokos as we've seen this week or last week. We're seeing killings in Shendam, in Riom, in Barakin Ladi, Bassa Mango, and the like since 2022. So it hasn't really been quiet and all of that. So I think this week is Bokos's turn. We've come quite a short time since the Christmas killings of 2023. The killings didn't really die down. The killings didn't really go away. They died down a little bit. So as to why we are seeing this thing now in the full swing across Plateau, across Borno, is number one, the government of the day, the one we currently have in Aso Rock, is not really that big on security. So the government doesn't really, the president, for instance, doesn't have that kind of an attention to security and the kind of master plan or interest that you could see that successive presidents since, say, Obasanjo, who looked at the Niger Delta issue as an existential crisis, the Yar'Adua government who thought the same and decided to give them amnesty, judicial administration who looked at Boko Haram as a crisis for the Nigerian state and its survival, and the Buhari government who looked at both Boko Haram and the IPOB issue as a threat to its rule and sovereignty. the Tinubu administration doesn't really see security as part of its mandate. So it's very happy to delegate such responsibility to the National Security Advisor, Malam Nuhu Ribadu. So on one hand, Ribadu doesn't really have KPIs, just the way Buhari's chiefs of defense chiefs had, or the way the people who ran the state of emergency in the northeast in Jonathan's time had. So the government is not really big on that. And away from that, I think the second reason is there seems to be this accommodation that Nigeria security forces have reached across the country in the theaters of operation. In the northeast, I've made this point several times. There have been this drawing down of forces between 2020 and 2021 that enabled the military to prosecute the counter-offensive against bandits in September 2021 in the northwest. So that drawdown didn't really stop. So while they were pulling forces away from the northeast to the northwest, many other forces were also being pulled from the northwest to the north central, from the northeast to the north central rather. Those forces have not returned to the northeast, and as a result, many things. It threw up several possibilities. One of the possibilities it threw up is that, in the first place, when it was leaving the northeast in 2020, 2021, there were already the super camp strategy, where the Nigerian army simply built garrison camps for themselves and their personnel so as to minimize personnel losses. It gave the insurgents enough grounds to move. And given the fact that some of the predictions we made, or some other people equally made when Shekau died, that his own faction is going to be the less dominant group, events have overtaken that prediction. ISWAP was a little bit weakened, and GS faction grew in size and in might. So they have taken over the Mandara Mountains, and 2024, towards the end of 2024, saw a resurgence of ISWAP. So all of these factors combined have made sure that from the boundary between Yobe North and northern Borno, where the Lake Chad Islands is, about 3 local governments, according to the Shia of Borno, have now been controlled by Boko Haram, most likely the Islamistic-backed faction. So all of these things have combined, both the government not really having a plan for security, the government not really being interested in security as much as is interested in the economy, as well as the military reaching that sort of accommodation that we can't defeat these guys. The best thing for us to do is just to manage them. All of these things have made security issues to come back to the front burner.
It's interesting that we're also seeing governors of the state, like Borno State governor, coming out, and even the traditional rulers raising alarm to say this security challenge is alarming and we need to do something to address it. So, what does this say about the trust in the federal security forces?
Um, not much people trust the government to protect them. Yet there are a few holdouts. I'm trying to remember the particular area in the country this week. I think I remember now. It was in Kebbi. So the Likurawa guys, which some people actually believe to be the Islamic State Sahel province, returned to Ogi local government in Kebbi and killed about 13 people. This was the first time they are doing, or the second time they are doing that kind of a last case killing since October last year, when the military allegedly carried out an operation and cleared them for the local government. So the local monarchs, the traditional rulers around Kebbi, have been calling for a Nigerian army base so as to watch the area 24/7 and to keep those guys out. But conventional Nigerian wisdom says that the presence of security installations, security personnel doesn't necessarily prevent crime. More often than not, these security forces are victims themselves. They are sitting ducks. If there's a prime example for this, it is Kaduna that has the highest amount of security and military installations across the country, and it is one of the safest states in not just the region but across the country. So the presence of a military facility doesn't guarantee peace. So I think their own thinking, the people who are requesting for the military base, might be doing it to think that it will be that the military will have a skin in the game. But for a military or the government forces who have sort of reached a mental accommodation with crime and insecurity, there's not really much that they can do in this regard. And so to answer your question directly, there are people who still hold out hope that the military can do something for them, or the government or the security forces can do something for them. But in generalities, this is not a conventional wisdom anymore. And you could see the clearest evidence of this in what happened in Urumi, which is a symptom of the vigilantism that has come to define security across the country. I was shocked this morning. I shouldn't be shocked, but surprised because I totally missed it. I was going through some of the security incidents across the country, and then I saw that Taraba State has also quietly set up its own vigilante system backed by the state government. So there is this kind of security arrangement across the country. I know of a couple of them now. Nasarawa State has its own vigilante. Niger has one. Benue has two. Taraba has one now. Anambra State has one. I'm talking about vigilantes that were set up by the state governments themselves. So these ones exist. And then there are also vigilantes that were set up by the communities who are the forefront of attacks by rogue actors. So all across the country, it is testament and it is a picture, a story that people do not really trust in the government's ability to keep them safe. The people don't trust the government. The states themselves do not trust the federal government's ability to keep them safe, and they resorted to vigilantism to make up for the shortfall.
Moving on to our final story. So we saw the Edo State Governorship Election Petition Tribunal meets the PDP State Aswe Godalo's challenge against the governor Monday's victory in the September 2024 elections. Does the tribunal's decision strengthen public confidence in the Nigerian judicial system and the electoral institution? And how did you see the people of Edo State receiving the news of this victory for the state
All
governor?
right. All right. So it's the electoral umpire INEC declared Monday Okpebolo of the APC winner. He won with about 291,000 votes against PDP's Saswe Godalo, who came up as first runner up with 247,274 votes. So the PDP filed a petition claiming that the election was marred by overvoting, manipulation of the results, non-compliance with the Electoral Act of 2022, and incorrect calculation processes. During the tribunal proceedings, they presented about 19 witnesses, submitted evidence including 153 BVAS machines from 133 polling units to argue that the votes were inflated in favor of APC. And the APC countered with only 4 witnesses saying that the election was free and fair, and while INEC on their part decided not to call any witnesses. So last week, the tribunal led by Justice Wilfred Pochi ruled on behalf of the APC and INEC, saying that the PDP had no case. It was a 3-member panel. They unanimously dismissed the PDP's petition. So, very importantly, I should add that the tribunals in its judgment stated that the PDP failed to meet the legal burden of proof that is required to overturn the election, emphasizing that the petitioners have to succeed on the strength of their own evidence, not on the weakness of the defense, which is the APC. And I think this is quite characteristic of much of what we've seen in the electoral tribunal since 2019. I don't think there is anybody who has paid attention to electoral tribunals and court cases across the country following the elections that would have the kind of implicit trust that is needed to survive, for a state to survive and to carry out its function effectively. We've seen a very, very prime example was the tribunal that ruled on Imo State election in 2019, and then the matter went all the way up to the Supreme Court, and the person who fourth in the election was declared as the legitimate winner of the election. So it doesn't really inspire confidence, because I think there seems to be a little bit of mismatch. What the ruling said is, number one, the burden of proof relied on the PDP to prove its own case, and the PDP must stop trying to emphasize on the weakness of the defense's own case. Meanwhile, the PDP prevented evidence from their own perspective. 19 witnesses that said that there was overvoting, there was inflation of results, prevented up to 153 BVAS from 133 polling units to argue that, see, here we are with the evidence that the results were inflated in favor of the APC. And then the PDP, the tribunal basically said, you're arguing against the strength of the defense's argument. I don't really know. I don't really get what they mean by that. So the tribunal also said that even if the disputed votes were deducted, Monday Okpebolo will still lead. So thereby reinforcing his victory with the highest number of valid votes. There is nobody who voted for PDP in the election that is going to take this as seriously as the tribunal wish it to be taken. And the PDP themselves, who are the plaintiffs, I don't think they are going to take it seriously. I do think they're going to appeal all the way to the Supreme Court. But to answer your question, I don't think it inspires as much confidence as it ought to. It's not as definitive as the kind of I don't know. It doesn't really inspire that kind of confidence, at least not to me.
So what future effects do you think this would have? Do you think that this ruling would influence future political contests in Edo State and other swinging states as well?
It is. It is because I think one of the most damning effects these kind of rulings are going to have, especially if it does turn out that there was a lot of electoral fraud that happened during the election and then the judiciary just glossed over it. I think the major lesson many political parties are going to be taking from this is you don't have to rig intelligently. You can rig brazenly, and once you have the judiciary in your pocket, the judiciary is going to validate whatever you say or whatever you do. And as it stands now, the confidence of Nigerians in the judiciary is at an all-time low, perhaps the lowest in my lifetime. So it's going to take a lot of work for people to start getting faith and trust back in the judiciary. Just today, there was something that happened on Twitter. I was seeing earlier that this young boy who welcomed Twitter will be one of his rally, which in a picture which really went viral, was arrested by some area boys in his area, accused of armed robbery, and then the police actually took him to a court, and the magistrates remanded him in prison. So we shouldn't be having this guy's a minor. We shouldn't really be having this kind of things if the judiciary really do what they're supposed to be, dispense justice as quickly as they're supposed to do. And many young people who are very savvy with social media, they're seeing these things. So in going forward, I think confidence in the judiciary is going to be low, and then it's going to lead to a zero-sum game where winner takes all. And by winner takes all, it will mean that you can rig as much as you want. You should not stop whenever you're rigging and then grow your conscience. No, you have to go all the way. And then when you're rigging, you also have to make sure that you have the judiciary in your pockets to get the maximum outcome. And I think this is the lesson that many of the political parties are going to be taking going forward.
Thank you so much for today. That's all for today. Thank you, Confidence, for bringing such thoughtful perspectives to the conversation. To all our listeners, this podcast is by SPM Intelligence. You can access our podcast by searching for SPM Intelligence anywhere you find podcasts. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe, like, share, and let us know your thoughts in the comments. For deeper insights into our work, please visit our website at spmintel.com. Remember to connect with us on all our social media platforms. You can find us on X, Facebook, Blue Sky, and LinkedIn at SPM Intelligence. Thank you for tuning into the week ahead. Next week, we'll be on a break. See you in 2 weeks.